But the problem here is when we think about people or older men who we look up to, it's not that they have to be serious all the time. It's not to be a killjoy. Because really, how many of us really want to model an older gentleman who is a killjoy? Who says, you got to be in church, you got to do, all this rough stuff. And is a killjoy and totally takes any excitement of life out of you. That's not what Paul's saying. Paul's talking about the older guy that I used to know in South Dakota, Gus Mudhank. I know I've talked about him before. But Gus at that time was about 85 years old. Gus would come up and pray like our elders do. He was never an elder of the congregation. He had been a deacon, that was it. But he would come up and pray. And when he would pray, people would listen. But he didn't use eloquent words. His phrases didn't always go together. He didn't use subject, verb, noun, all that. Whatever, all that English. He talked more the way I talk. He just talked from his heart, and people listened because he was worthy of respect. But Gus was also a fun-loving guy because he wanted us to make sure that I was done at 10:30 because the races on Sunday in the summer were about 2 hours away and they started about 11 o'clock and he would get there within an hour and a half. He had an old caddy and it would fly on the South Dakota roads. He loved to have fun as an 85-year-old man, but he was still serious in his faith. That's what Paul is talking about here. He's saying, you men of the congregation, you men who are older, I want you to be serious and worthy of respect so that when others look at you, they can say, wow, that person, they're striving to grow in their relationship with Jesus Christ in a joyful way. As Paul says, rejoice in the Lord always. Again, I say rejoice. In a joyful, fun way. Paul also goes on here and says to the older men, you're called to be self-controlled. Now, if you were here last week, Chapter 1, Titus, talks about self-control. All through chapter 2, it deals with self-control. The ability to govern our basic instincts and our passions. Not to be ruled by our passions, but to rule our passions and our instincts. So the reality is, as we grow older, some of those instincts and passions don't just stop. But Paul says, you older men, you older men who are in the faith, and we'll even see next week because he does talk about women being under self-control. We are called to have that self-control in our life, which takes you back to being worthy of respect. See how these all fit together? It's amazing how the Apostle Paul set these up. Then what we have here is like a trilogy. There's a trilogy. The Apostle Paul says, okay, where am I? Self-controlled and sound in faith, in love, and in endurance. It's like a trilogy. To be sound in these things. To be sound in faith. Now, I don't know about many of you, but when you're younger, you think you know how to be a parent, then you become a parent, you realize you really didn't know how to be a parent. Or you think you know how to be a spouse and you become a spouse and you really didn't know how to be a spouse. Or you think you knew how to be a step-parent and you really don't know how to be a step-parent. Or you think you know how somebody should teach and you actually get in the teaching position and you really don't know how to teach. Or you think that you can do better than me. Come on up, right here. And you come up and it's like, it's really not as easy as it all looks. When we're not doing something, we think that we know better. Well, the reality is that what Paul here is saying is healthy in our faith. As we get older, and I don't know, I know my dad had talked about this. My dad, who was a pastor, talked about this, and he was totally on it. As I've gotten older, I've learned it. Pastor Budden, you've been a pastor for a long time. Maybe you understand this. But I believe that as we get older, as I've gotten older, I know less and less, really, about how life should just be set. But I got to live more and more on faith. Does that make sense? When we're younger, we think we got the world by the tail and we got it all figured out. We can tell everybody else how to do it. But as I've gotten older, I realize, there's some things, I know about faith, but there's other things I know less, but it ends up being more faith. Blessed is the man or woman whose tree is rooted by the streams of water, and the tree roots go deep. The Apostle Paul also says that we are called to be healthy in love. Love. Love, that decision of the will that we make with each other. We may not always like each other, but Paul says we're called to be healthy in love as we walk with one another. Love, that unconditional love, we're called to give to each other. Love is called to be demonstrative with one another. Healthy in love, it needs to be sacrificial. Healthy in love needs to be like a little child who loves their mommy and daddy. Healthy in love. Healthy in love is the idea, the fact that as we grow older in our faith, we can become more tolerant of others. Yeah, we become more strong in what we may have our faith, but it's not as much of a finger shaking, but it's more of a opening up and saying, come with us. Come on the journey with us. Healthy in love. Healthy in endurance. Healthy in endurance. Now, some of you have run marathons. Some of you men, some of you women have run marathons. I think you're crazy if you run a marathon, but you run marathons. Well, when you start running a marathon, you start with that couple mile practice, or you build up and you gain strength, and after a while you're able to run the marathon. You grow in your endurance. You grow in your strength. Some people here like to do weightlifting. You weightlift 2-3 times a week, and you grow and your muscles look it, and you're looking like Mr. Hawk, and you just got it going on. While you're growing in your strength and your ability to have more pressure put on you. So as you do more weights, you have more pressure on the weights put on you, and you can lift them. If you're running a marathon, you can go farther distances because you can have more pressure put on you to do the run. That's what the Apostle Paul is saying here. In our walk of life, may we be healthy in the endurance of our life, our Christian life. The word endurance it's two Greek words, which means to abide under. To abide under. To work and live under the pressures of life. And to still be strong under those pressures of life. Well, it's interesting here because Paul goes from older men, then he goes to the older, respectful women, he goes to the younger women, and we're going to jump to the young men. I don't know if you caught it, but the Apostle Paul only has basically one thing to say to younger men. Younger men who tend to be more ruled by their passions or their desires than always by their self-control or their ability to say no to something. Young men who are more driven by their ability to do wheelies. Willies? I'm saying that word wrong, aren't I? Yeah. You all know what I mean. About a year ago, I saw a couple guys going down 131. I'm going down the highway, they're going down the highway, and they passed me doing a wheelie on their motorcycle. I'm thinking to myself, are you insane? One little gust of wind, you got one little chipmunk that runs across the highway, you're going to tip over, you're going to run into my windshield, and we're both going to be at heaven's gates. Just because you don't have the self-control to keep two wheels on the ground. Well, with that, you can see what the Apostle Paul says. Because I say, you see the young kids doing that, you don't see too many older men doing things like that, or older women doing things like that. So what does the Apostle Paul have to say to young men? It's just a few words here. Verse 6. Similarly, encourage the young men to be self-controlled. Isn't that awesome? The Apostle Paul doesn't have a whole lot that he has to say to the teenagers, the 20, 30-something-year-old men. But he's saying, when you go to college,